anything else in my life. And it just feels good to be back in the house of God with fellow-minded people. So without anything else really to talk about, tonight, switch over to the other feed. We have another feed now. It's probably another live thing. So close out of this one and go launch into the other one, and I'll give you like 15 seconds. We'll all just sit here and wait on you. Should be fixed now. Should be good. Please pause for technical difficulties. No, I don't know, but I'm letting. You gotta give them time. Give me time to finish my sermon. And there's my joke. All right, I'm gonna. Hopefully, y'all are all here with me. I don't know if the second feed's on the second phone or if both phones work, or I don't know what's going on. I have no idea where to look. I'm gonna look over there. All right. I'm going to be preaching though on. Y'all may be seated. Yeah, we aren't going to get into anything anytime soon. I'm just going to talk for a while. I'm going to be talking on the subject of blind faith. So, we have, as humans, we define the human body as having 5 senses, right? And we define ourselves through these senses. We have sight, smell, hearing, taste, and touch. These senses are how we relate to the world we live in. It is our unique perspective created from these 5 senses that shape how we perceive and experience events and situations in our lives. One of the most interesting topics centered around the senses of the body and what they do and how they affect us is the question of which sense is most important. This is often probably a discussion you've had a few times in your life. If you had to give up one of your senses, what would you give up? What's the one you think you could live without? And intrinsically with that, what's the one you would least want to lose? And when given a choice, I was looking up and I found some surveys, and this survey with a little over 100 million participants in it, they were given the option of what do you see as the most important sense? What do you value most out of your 5 senses? And overwhelmingly, there was a majority for the sense of sight. Around 74% of participants selected sight, with only 5% selecting smell, and 6 and 7 and taste and touch, and then 8% selecting hearing. There's an overwhelming majority because we have a need to see things. Sight is our most important sense, and it's most likely commonly considered as our most important sense because it often plays the largest role in how we perceive the world. A few facts about your eyes and about your sight. On average, your eyes focus on 50 different objects every second. Your eyes can distinguish approximately 10 million different colors. Approximately 80% of all learning comes through the eyes. In darkness, your eyes can detect a candle flame from about 1.7 miles away. In fact, the only organ more complex than a human eye is the human brain. With sight being as important as it is when we experience a loss of sight, when we find ourselves cast into darkness or blinded in our situation, that we lose the ability to perform some of the most basic human functions. No longer can we read body language or facial expressions. No longer can we perceive our surroundings outside of our immediate reach. Take my smell, taste, or hearing, and I could still move and get around just fine. Take my touch, and though I may struggle, I can fight and pull and struggle. My muscle memory can kick in to get my legs moving. Maybe I can't feel everything I'm touching, and maybe I'd have this disassociation with what I'm moving and how I'm moving, but as long as I could see, I could grab things, and I could pull my way, and I could struggle through it all, but I could still move. I could get from point A to point B. But take my sight, and you could immediately render me to a snail's pace. And after years of practice and something that can help me extend my reach to analyze my surroundings, I would be able to move but slower and less of my ability. I would be rendered stagnant by my inability to see. When we lose sight, we can't perceive what's really there. I'm sure all of us have seen through Facebook or YouTube or maybe even live in one event or another where they do that little game where they take a box and they sit out in front of you, and it's open on this side where the crowd can see, but then the participants can't see inside the box. They have to reach inside and find out what's in the box. And it could be something as inconspicuous as a toothbrush. But then when they reach down and they feel those pokey bristles, oh, they just know it's like a porcupine in there. It's going to, it's going to bite them. It's going to get them. It's something alive. It's moving. When they're the ones moving it. All right, you take a piece of rope and they think it's a snake. Because whenever you take away our sight, even given our other senses, we have this inability to perceive what's real and what we make up in our minds. See, Israel lost sight once. There was a point in time where Israel lost sight. When famine struck the land and drought swallowed up all the crops, and it was under the leadership of Joseph in Egypt, he brought his family and Jacob, and the Hebrew people came to Egypt in this time of famine. They left the promised land and came and dwelled in this new place. And here they dwelled for many generations and grew into a large people. However, it was in this time, removed from the promised land, that God's people lost sight of where they belonged. And after the plagues and the pillar of after all the plagues and following the pillar of fire by night and the journey through the wilderness, when they finally stood at the edge of the place where they had came from, the place where they truly belonged, they looked out to it and saw giants and people with great power and strength and impossible to overcome foe. All but two of them couldn't see what was really there, a land of provision and plenty crafted by the creator of the universe to serve his people. They saw the land as something too expensive and impossible to obtain, too big and insurmountable to take, when in reality it was theirs. They had created something about this land that was in their heads, when in reality they already owned it. In reality it was theirs to begin with. In reality they are the ones whose name is on it. You see, I went through a semi-similar situation just recently over the past almost a month. I'm sure y'all already know, and for any of y'all who haven't, but as of June 6th, me and Kimberly are officially engaged. And a few of you, though probably all of you know, few of you probably know that the ring came on the morning of June 6th. Now, this wasn't like anything really in fault of my part. I ordered the ring on March 20th, right? And in between that time, I ordered it March 20th. The projected delivery immediately from them, because they're backed up from COVID and all that, was June 3rd. That's already a really long, but I can deal with it. It's fine. Come in June 3rd, and I'm going to trust it. It's going to be okay. Then the weeks start to go by, 1 week, 2 week. Dad and Rockland and Mom start ordering other things online. They start coming in just in the next couple of days. Like literally, Rockland ordered 2 things online, and one came in 2 days, the next one in 3 days. Now I'm sitting here. Mine hasn't even shipped yet. I'm just still pending June 3rd. It's going to be there. So I'm sitting there. I'm waiting. I know I've ordered this thing. I've spent the money. It's there, but I'm waiting for it to ship. It hasn't even started on its way. So many other things ordered and received by other people in the house. And for nearly a month, I'm literally just like on edge the entire time, especially the closer it's starting to get and it still hasn't shipped. It's it's March 30th. Still hasn't shipped. And saying it's going to get here by June 3rd. Just doing some math in my head, and I'm like, that's not necessarily adding up yet, And so I'm just on edge. I'm probably pretty irritable, and I apologize to everybody who put up with me over that about month. And then finally it ships on the morning of the 2nd. And see, I even paid extra for USPS priority. I paid an extra price for it, got it in there. It's going to come in. And then so it's like 2-day shipping, and then it go on the 1st. I'm like, 2nd. Well, anybody has like really quick 2-day shipping where it comes in the next day, double speed. But they said it's still June 3rd. But then when it finally shipped on the morning of the 2nd, they had moved it to the 4th. All right. Or was it 5th? It was one of the two. They had pushed it back just a little bit, but it should have came in. I think they moved it to the 5th. Sorry, rambling. Then so by the end of the 3rd, so in the morning of the 2nd, it officially ships from Akron, Ohio. By the end of the 3rd, it is in somewhere in Mississippi. It's about 2 hours away from the house. Okay? And then by the end of the 4th, it's just a little bit more north and about 2 hours away from the house. Because it went from there to Memphis, and it was at Memphis. And I got to Memphis at like midnight that night. But it was at Memphis. And so we were all confirmed, and it said that it should get to the house in the morning. And we were actually supposed to do everything on the 5th. It would have been Mom and Dad's wedding anniversary, and that was the thing we were going to do. And so it was the morning of the 5th, and we're just waiting. It's supposed to come to the post office. Should be there by 6. Supposed to call them around 7:30, 8. That way they have time to have went through everything, and then we can call, and we can go get the package picked up at our local post office. So we're just sitting there. We're laying in bed, and we have this faith that we can't see it, we don't know it's there, but we have this faith that's going to come through. We have this faith that's going to be there the morning of the 5th. And that whole time, that night, I wasn't nervous about anything about the proposal. I didn't care if anything else went wrong or any of that. I was just mad and nervous that I couldn't see it. I just wanted to see it. I wanted to have it. That's the only thing that was making me nervous or wrong or messed up, was because I just wanted to see, make sure it wasn't damaged, make sure nothing had went wrong with it. They didn't give me the wrong one or something like that. I just wanted to make sure I had it. I was going to be fine. But I went to bed that night just wishing I could see it. In the morning of the 5th, it should have come in, but it didn't. And if you have never seen a more demoralized group of people than me and those two guys over there. When we did that call and they couldn't find it, and we called back a couple hours later and they still couldn't find it, and they were trying to call Memphis and Memphis wasn't calling back, and it was just done immediately. There, it's all lost. All faith is gone. Immediately, I think I get it from her. We start thinking of every worst possible scenario, right? It's stuck somewhere under some cabinet in Memphis on the floor, and it's not going to be found for 10 more years when they, renovate the building or something like that. It's just gone. I didn't think of this one. That was all her, but maybe the lady over at the post office is like, oh, it's a ring, it's valuable, and then just stole it, and put it away, to keep for herself, right? But everything's gone. It's ruined. Nothing can be good. It's not found. It's all bad. And immediately, my brain begins to make up every possible worst-case scenario. My mind begins to conquer reality because I can't see it anymore. And now I can't trust what I'm seeing. I could see those notifications. It got there. It was in Memphis. It was in transit. It wasn't in transit. What happened? Now I'm blind. I'm gone, and I lose all of my belief. But then finally, the 6th, it did come in. It did ship from Memphis the next day. What happened is it just never made the dispatch because it came in so late. I don't know how it came in so late, traveling like 30 minutes, but it did. It took them a whole day to get it over there. 30 minutes. It's fine. But then, finally, in the morning of the 6th, I had it in my hand. It was there. It was right. It was fine. And I was good. Yeah, and she said yes. That's one of the bigger parts. Well, more she does like what she does, and she didn't say yes. She just like nodded her head and doesn't talk, because that's what happens to her in exciting or like big situations. Just yeah. Anyways, so it was all fine. It was all good. But yeah, I had that moment where I was struggling with that concept of my faith and my belief because I was blind to my scenario. I thought back on it recently and found it kind of ironic that at the first of the year, everyone's joke was about having vision in 2020. Haha, it's great. It's 2020. We're going to have vision. We're all going to go forward, and we're all going to have all these things and all these plans, and it's all going to work out. And then now, after some of the most hectic months I have ever seen our world live through, it almost feels like we can't even see back to the good old days. When the biggest issue that plagued our nation was the Cowboys potentially making it into the playoffs. Can't even see our way out of this. We're completely blinded by everything else going on around us right now. It almost feels like we're stuck here, blind, waiting for what's going to happen next, waiting for the next thing that's going to hum. It all started with us having vision, having plan, and now this year has meant nothing according to what any of us had imagined. It really feels impossible to believe anything good is coming, because once we lose our sight, it becomes so easy to lose our belief. I meant to predicate with this, and I'm going to go ahead and say it now because some stuff won't make sense here in just a second. In that intro, I didn't write, and now stuff I forgot to say that I meant to say because I didn't write it. About a week ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, whenever we started coming back to church, and I started getting this idea in my head, trying to think what I want to preach when time comes, when I get up there. There's a song that played on the radio. I couldn't remember any other words from it, but it had this one line. It's called You Haven't Seen It Yet, or something like that. I think that's the name of it. But it's about how maybe you just haven't seen it yet. Maybe you just haven't seen the promise yet. Maybe you haven't just seen the moment. And that was just playing in my head over and over and over. And I was kind of thinking on that concept. And that's where I built this message around, where I had a lot of inspiration for it. This idea of maybe we just haven't seen the end product yet. And see, the cool thing about faith, and what the best part is those years already went so differently than any of us originally planned, and many of us find ourselves going through things that we would have never imagined going through, not just in COVID and the current state of our nation, but many of us are battling through personal battles in family and in health, in finances, and in mental fortitude. And I think it would be okay for all of us to admit that in at least one aspect of our lives, in one way or another, we feel blinded and stuck, deprived from perceiving the situation outside of our immediate reach and influence. Like what I described earlier, when we feel like we can't move and we can't get anything other than what we can just reach right there, and we can't know anything outside of the things that are just immediately around us. But tonight I feel that God has led me to remind us that faith is blind. Hebrews chapter 11 verse 1 says, "Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen." Romans 8:24, "For we are saved by hope, but hope that is seen is not hope. For what a man seeth, why doth he yet hope for?" Faith can only exist when we can't see what is going on. To have faith is to be blind. But that isn't even the best part. And when I was doing all my studies about interesting facts about eyes and sight and all these other things, and I was looking into this and looking into properties about sight and properties about vision, science has shown, and there have been many studies to prove, that one's ability to remember past events is greatly improved when we close our eyes. When we make ourselves blind to all the details that are around us and all the other things, we can remember all of the other things that we've been through. It's when we find ourselves in the darkness, when we find ourselves blinded, that we can look back. And just like David recounting when God was with him with the lion, and God was with him with the bear, and now he stands before Goliath. But it's when we find ourselves acting on blind faith in darkness, when we can't see our way out, when we don't know the outcome that's coming down the road, then we can step back and we can remember every other time he's pulled us through, every other time we've made it from point A to point B, every other time when we couldn't see our way through it, we came out on the other side. See, where Israel failed, as it's so easy to lose your belief when you lose your sight. It's so easy to stand on the other side and say, I came through it all, and it was worth it. And it was hard then, but I came through it all, and I made it through. But whenever you're stuck in the middle of it and you're blind, the only thing you have is to be blind and remember every other time in the past, because this one's not done yet. And this one isn't over yet, and I don't know where this one's going to go, but I know what happened the last time, and I know what happened previous in my story, and so I know that there's some kind of trend following me here, and so I can have faith that I move forward in this. To be blind is to have faith. Faith is blind. And now, and this is where I feel kind of weird, because this is something I've never really done with a sermon before, but I felt so God was calling me to do. I would like to simply just share some messages, not to any person directly, just to almost like letters of faith that God has laid on my heart. Firstly, to the saints struggling in their fight for righteousness. For those who the journey has become so long and tiring. For those who have faithfully walked step by step and day by day, but the devil has just been on your back, weighing you down, making your soul weary and thirsty in a trying time. Let me remind you of the story of Jericho, where the saints and the godly walked in march for 7 consecutive days around that giant city of Jericho. I'm sure at times they felt blind. I'm sure they had questions on, why are we even doing this? Why, we walked through the wilderness for years. We were kept outside in the wilderness for years. We have walked through trial and pain. We have walked through desert and river. Why are we sitting here walking around why are we sitting here walking around the battle? Why are we still having to put up with this? Why are we still having to do this? If I was there on day 2, I would rather just die than make it to day 6. I would be there because I wouldn't want to continue. I would have these things where I would just be tired and I would be thirsty, and I wouldn't want to continue around. However, on the seventh day, it was their blindness that empowered their shouts and praises with faith that knocked over impossible walls. So to the saint growing sore from walking day after day and following the same routine week after week, maybe you just haven't seen the walls crumble yet. Maybe you just haven't seen the day when the walls of the enemy fall and reveal a city made and crafted for the children of God. Maybe you just haven't seen those pearly gates yet. Maybe you just haven't yet seen the streets made of gold and filled with jubilee. 1 Corinthians 2:9, but as it is written, eye hath not seen, nor ear heard, neither have entered into the heart of man the things which God hath prepared for them that love him. 2 Corinthians 4:18, while we look not at the things which are seen, but at the things which are not seen. For the things which are seen, they may be temporal, but the things which are not seen are eternal. May I remind you tonight in this blindness, if you can look back, remind you to a city that is lit with the shining light of God. Can I remind you of a city up on a hill, a place prepared and laid up for the faithful and true? A letter to the one who is currently struggling with feelings of inadequacy and self-doubt. Those convinced that their mistakes are too great and rule them out of the work for the kingdom of God, or those who feel too small and weak compared to the enemy or task that surrounds them. May I remind you of what just a few fishes and loaves became in the master's hand. How a man hiding from the enemy became a mighty man of valor in the eyes of the Lord. Can I remind you of what God did and what God can do with a boy, a stone, and a sling? Maybe you just haven't seen the impact that would come from just a little step of faith. Maybe you just haven't seen what's going to happen when you begin to act on that little thing you can do. What seems so minorly insignificant in your eyes is a moment of endless potential in the master's hands, a moment of unimaginable potential when given to God. Now to those who are desperate and in need of a divine intervention. Those who feel completely lost and without hope. Those cast into complete and utter darkness that they cannot see anything past their situation. Those looking into impossible battles, those completely blind with nowhere to turn. May I remind you of a ram that lay stuck in a bushel. Now, I never really thought of this much. You know, we've always heard the story, and Abraham was there, and he was about to come down with the hand, and all of a sudden the angel of the Lord spoke and said, stop, don't. And there's a ram in a bushel, and we just accept it. There's a ram in a bushel. It was there. It's an amazing, beautiful story. We just accept that a ram was in the bushel. But I don't think in that moment a ram just came running through and then got caught in the thorns and like, oh, that was there for Abraham. Now, I'd imagine that as Abraham's taking that journey up the mountain, as Abraham sat there and said, me and my son are going to come back down after we go up and worship, I imagine there was already a ram stuck in a bushel up there. And as Abraham went up, and it just was out of Abraham's sight. It was just out of Abraham's, he couldn't see it yet. He was blind to it in the moment, but he still acted on his faith. He still held true to his belief. And when he got there and he got to the very end of his trial, there the bush was. There the ram was. It was in the bush the whole time. It was there the whole time. God never had any intention for it to not be there. It was there. It was crafted for him. But he couldn't see it until I'd weathered it through the trial. When the armies of Syria came after Israel, and Elijah kept speaking to the king of Israel and telling him, what they were going to do, and kept giving them these secrets to defeat them on the battlefield time after time. And the Syrians found out, they said, where is this Elijah who can speak what I speak in my bedchamber? Where can I go find him? And they track him down to the city, and they surround it with chariots and horses, and they completely cut off the city. There's no escape. There's no exit. It's completely surrounded by the enemy. And the servant of the scribe to Elijah comes up to him and says, Master, what are we going to do? Do you see what's out there? Do you see what's around us? We're completely blocked off. No light can get in. Nothing can get in. We're blind to anything outside of this. It's all around us. It's right here near us. There's no way out of this. There's no escape route. We are stuck in this, and we're going to die in it. And Elijah said, I guess you just can't see it yet. Maybe you haven't seen it yet. And he laid his hands on him and he prayed for him that God would open his eyes. And when he opened his eyes, he saw armies and legions of angels surround about, walk right by them and lead them where they would go. It was in the blindness of the situation that allowed divine intervention that seems so great and miraculous that we can hardly wrap our heads around it. Because it's blind faith that acts in the darkness. If the music would come and if everyone would stand. And I finally feel led to deliver a message to the enemy. This is to every devil and demon wreaking chaos across the world right now. Every principality of evil and darkness, every divisive spirit in our nation. I know you think you are winning this fight. I know you think you control the chaos that you are surrounding the church in. But devil, let me remind you that in this darkness that you have caused, you are standing on some uneasy ground. Do you remember 3 Hebrew boys? When an evil king, Nebuchadnezzar, ordered that all submit and fall to his reign of darkness and terror and chaos, where he, much like you now, sat there and he sought to eliminate all light and illumination from the children of God. And when the 3 refused to bow, when the 3 refused to submit to the darkness and fall victim to it, oh, I'm sure that same smug look you wear now was plastered all over King Nebuchadnezzar's face as he saw the 3 Hebrew boys going towards the fire. And they sat there and they stood, we believe in our God and we believe that he can save us. And even if he doesn't, he's still worthy of our praise and we won't bow. And all that had to get him fired up, and he got the fire 7 times hotter, and he started them down. And as they got closer, I'm sure you could see on their face, where they're, you're saying, God can save us, God can save us. But there had to be that point right there, right when they stood on the very edge, right when they were about to fall into the fire, when they accepted God's not going to save us, but it's okay. God's not going to save us, but it's okay. And when he watched them finally topple over the edge, when the 3 refused to bow, and they had that look, at that point, when they toppled, I'm sure King Nebuchadnezzar felt so accomplished and achieved how he had snuffed out the light from the church in his darkness. At some point, they had to be convinced they were falling in, and he felt his role and his power grow. But if I can ask of you, devil, to look into this furnace you've created, this fire you've amped up 7 times hotter, and come look at this church you're trying to prosecute. No, I'm sorry, Satan, but we aren't burning, and we aren't singed. We don't even have ash on our clothes. Maybe you just haven't seen it yet. But no, here we are moving in this fire. No, we aren't burning, and we aren't falling, and we aren't being ruined by this darkness, but we're here dancing in the fire. We're here unconquered in the fire. This light is 7 times brighter now that we're in it. Here we stand in the fire with a blind faith. Maybe you just haven't seen it yet, devil. Because it was in blindness that we built our faith. And it is in blindness that we're going to keep in our faith. And it isn't blindness that's going to stop us now. 2020 may have us in the worst state we have been in a long time. We may have been kept disconnected and separated in the darkness. But church, let me remind you about some blind faith. Let me remind you about some radical faith. 3 Hebrew children who stood up and said, I see the situation and I see the darkness. And it's really all I can see. But I serve a God who's worthy. And a God who can save me. Church, right now, 2020 may be in the darkest state that it's been in yet. But church, can I ask you something? Can I make you have a little bit of thought provocation? Just maybe you haven't seen it yet. We came out of the, kind of in that turn of the year, December, coming into 2020, and we could say we could feel a change. We can feel a shift. There's something happening. There's something changing. There's something moving. There's something growing. And now it all seems lost and gone, but maybe you just haven't seen it yet. Maybe you're in the middle of a but God moment. Maybe the situation seems so dire and it seems so hopeless. Maybe you seem so weak and so feeble and so unable. But then maybe you just haven't seen it yet. Maybe you just haven't stood at the end of it all yet. Maybe we just haven't stood there where we're having to build a second building to hold a revival in the end times. Maybe you just haven't seen it yet. But I know God's promise doesn't fail. I know God's word doesn't return void. I can look back and I have a past that I can remember on. For the first time since I was 6 days old, I'm going to go have another open heart, well, not open heart surgery. It's going to be a heart cath. They're going to go through my leg and shove a little camera up there and maybe put a stent in there. I'm pretty sure I have a cramp. I'm pretty confident about it. And that's going to be a pretty big day for me. First time since I was 6 days old, they're going to go back in my heart all over again. And I'll be honest with you, church. It honestly terrifies me. I know it's not a big deal in the heart cath, even if they put a stent in. It's not like a high problem surgery. It's not something that often causes anything. But, there's just part of me that kind of wishes, I'm 20 years old. Oh, I'm about to be 20 years old. I won't be 20 by the time I have it. I'll still be 19. There's just a part of me that wishes, that I didn't have to go through it. There's just a part of me that wishes that I didn't have to be in this darkness around it all. Because I just don't want to put up with it for my life. I just don't want to go through it with my life. And I'll be honest, I've cried over it. I've not been able to sleep over it. I've been irritable over it. I've struggled with it so much. But I don't remember. I've heard the stories of when I was born, rushed to Little Rock. And there, the nurse took me away and said, Mom, Dad, hold the boy. This is probably the last time you're ever going to see him alive. By the time I made it to the hospital, I'd stabilized. I went through the surgery, and then I was prayed an abundant life over me, and I was prayed all these things over me that I was going to live an abundant life and go on and do great things and all this with the Lord. And then, probably now 4 or 5 years ago, I went again, and at the doctor, they noticed the aorta, and it seemed grown. And now I've all heard the testimony before, but they noticed this thing, and they said, hey, we might have to have heart surgery. I'll bring you back for a heart cath. I might have to go back in there and check this out. Or not a heart cath, an MRI at the time. And then I remember going to an NAYC and various events and feeling this amazing Spirit of God come over me. And I remember feeling like something had changed and something had happened. And when we got back, what they had thought was a 45 millimeter aneurysm was shrunk to a 38 millimeter aneurysm, which is just what that woman over there prayed for. But I stood there in that moment, and that day, when it was a potential surgery, when it was a possible surgery, when they told me, we might have to go in there, I remember standing up off of that table I was laying on, and I looked them right in the eyes, and I said, I'm not going to have surgery. It's not going to happen. But I remember this time when he said, we're going to go ahead and schedule the heart cath, and we're going to go in there and have a look around, and we might have to put a stent in there if it has an aneurysm. I remember immediately being cast into the darkness because I couldn't see anymore. Then it was already happened. Then I was thrust into the moment. And I've been fighting it and struggling with it since, because it's June 26th, so it's about, a little under 20 days away. And it's just been racking my brain, but I feel like God has spoken to me these past few days. That the faith I had whenever I stood up off that table 4 years ago, and I said, I'm not going to go through it because he said I didn't have to. And it's not going to be anything lasting or bad because he said that wouldn't happen in my life. And I was able to look back and remember then. How come now in the darkness I refuse to look back and remember what happened then? Remember when I came out on the other side and I stood there with a testimony and a miracle to my name? Church, let me adjure you to look back and remember. Faith is blind. When we can't see and when we can't move past it and when we can do nothing else but fall to our knees and we're in the lowest spot we can get. The Bible said if you will humble yourselves and bow, if you will get lower. Whenever you're as low as you can get, if you'll just get a little lower and then call on my name, then I will hear you and I will answer. I'll pick you up in my right hand and hold you higher than you've ever been. And what I felt originally to be a message to come and sing and jump and shout, I feel a deep call of the Spirit. If you want to come up to the front, these altars are open. And I feel it completely appropriate tonight that we find a spot with our eyes closed and in darkness where we remember everything that our God is and our God's done. May be dark, but we haven't seen it yet. It may seem hopeless, but then again, isn't that the whole point? Hopelessness, because it's in hopelessness that we have faith. It's in the darkness and the blindness that we can believe in something greater and something bigger than what we're in right now. Isn't it all by design? Just haven't seen it yet.